This virus was beyond terrifying. Anyone infected who stepped outdoors would suddenly suffocate, without any warning. The main character, Jason, had been arguing with his wife recently. Out of anger, he'd been eating and sleeping at his office for days. Ironically, that decision saved his life. He avoided the first wave of the outbreak. But when Jason finally decided to go home and make peace with his wife, he discovered something horrifying. He was already infected. The virus spread much faster than anyone could have imagined. Before the government could respond, society had already collapsed in chaos. The few who managed to survive were forced to hide inside concrete buildings. They were safe, for now, but their food and water supplies were running dangerously low. Jason's company had become a shelter for many survivors. After 3 long months of digging, they finally broke through a subway tunnel wall. That meant they could now reach any part of the city underground. Jason's first thought was his wife. He needed to find her, but the tunnels were pitch dark. No landmarks, no signs, and the cell towers had long stopped working. The only way to find his home was with GPS navigation. After searching for hours, he finally found a car with a GPS system. But someone had gotten there first. Jason soon discovered that the company manager, Hank, had taken it. Desperate, Jason went to Hank's office and begged to borrow the GPS so he could go home and find his wife. He even offered the supplies he'd collected as payment, but Hank wasn't interested in anything, except a flashlight. Jason tried reasoning, bargaining, nothing worked. Finally, he played his last card. "If you don't lend it to me, I'll tell everyone about the GPS." Hank's eyes burned with anger, but in the end, he agreed to go with Jason. Once they were ready, the two set out on a dangerous journey through the underground tunnels. By now, the subway had become humanity's refuge, but resources were even scarcer than before. Catching a single rat could make someone's day. Their expressions were tense as they reached an underground station where more survivors had gathered, forming a chaotic black market camp. While they were taking it all in, a thief suddenly snatched the backpack with the GPS inside. Jason and Hank chased him through the crowd, up to the upper levels of the station, only to realize the thief had backup. Jason tried to stay calm and reason with the leader, until the man flashed a police badge and a gun. That's when Jason realized civilization was gone. What remained was the law of the jungle, but fate gave them a chance. At that very moment, the city's power grid went out. Total darkness. Hank lunged at the gang leader, wrestling him to the ground, while Jason grabbed the GPS. Then came a gunshot. Hank had killed the leader, and moments later, another shot ended the henchman. Hearing more people approaching, they ran as fast as they could, using the chaos to escape. After a short rest, they continued following the GPS. Jason noticed Hank kept collecting various seeds along the way. He couldn't help but ask, "Why? We can't even survive outside. What are you keeping them for?" Hank just smiled, saying nothing. He checked the GPS and said, "If we go through this sewer tunnel, it'll take us straight to your apartment." Jason double-checked the map over and over. He couldn't afford any mistakes. Once he confirmed the route, he set up a gas pipe for their escape plan, while Hank aimed the stolen gun. But Hank's arm was injured. He missed several shots. With only one bullet left, Jason took the gun. He'd never fired one before, but his determination gave him focus. Bang! A deafening explosion erupted. Flames shot into the air, blasting open the tunnel wall. When the smoke cleared, their plan had worked. They climbed out of the sewer and found several survivors living in the building. For the first time, Jason felt a little hope. But when he reached his own apartment door, his heart sank. The lock had been broken. Through the peephole, he saw a pair of unfamiliar eyes staring back. Panic took over. Jason banged on the door wildly until Hank helped him force it open. Inside stood a nervous man. And moments later, a woman and her daughter ran out of the bedroom. Through the girl's explanation, Jason learned that this family had taken refuge here, thinking the place was abandoned. Jason didn't blame them. He only asked if they'd seen his wife. They shook their heads. Disheartened, Jason walked into the bedroom and froze when he saw a medical record on the table. It was his wife's. She was pregnant. He had never known. His mind flashed back to the early days of the outbreak, when the news was reporting infection zones. He and his wife were arguing about whether to have a child. Jason had said that having a baby in such times was pure foolishness. Those words had shattered her heart. They fought, and he stormed off to work, a shift that ended up lasting until the end of the world. He'd tried calling her later, but her friend always answered. Then, when the signal died, all contact was lost. Now, sitting with that medical report in hand, Jason could only imagine the pain his wife must have felt. A wave of guilt and regret flooded Jason's heart. But before he could sink too deep into it, Hank rushed in, shouting that they'd found drinking water. In this world, even ordinary rain had become the fountain of life. They collected enough to fill 2 large barrels. After saying goodbye to the family staying in his apartment, Jason decided to check his wife's workplace. Maybe she was there, but Hank stopped him. Their deal was simple. He'd only promised to escort Jason home. Now that the mission was complete, Hank wanted Jason's flashlight so he could take care of his own task. Jason refused. His wife and unborn child were still out there. He couldn't turn back now. Their argument turned into a fight until the flashlight was smashed between them, plunging everything back into darkness. Panting and exhausted, they finally calmed down. That's when Hank opened up. His father had suffered a stroke 3 months ago and was lying helpless in the city hospital. The only reason Hank left the company was to go find and care for him. Jason fell silent. Then, without hesitation, he offered to help Hank get to the hospital first. And afterward, he'd continue searching for his wife. But first, they needed light. They groped through the darkness until they found an abandoned church. Inside, they managed to scavenge a few lighters, but the moment they lit a small fire, a beastly roar echoed from the shadows. Gripping sharpened sticks, they crept forward, and out from the dark stepped a massive brown bear. They ran for their lives. Hank tripped and fell, the bear charging straight for him. Jason was already at the exit, safety just a few steps away. But he stopped. He hesitated for only a second, then ran back, plunging his stick into the bear's side. Hank grabbed a torch and joined the fight, but Jason shouted, "Drop it!" At the last moment, Jason wedged the stick into the floorboards, bracing for impact, and the charging bear impaled itself. When it was finally over, they collapsed, trembling. That night, for the first time in months, they feasted on roasted bear meat. After surviving death together, the tension between them melted away. As they rested, Hank revealed a haunting thought. What if this virus wasn't meant to destroy humans, but to wipe out modern civilization itself? He explained that during the early outbreak, he'd heard radio transmissions saying some isolated tribes and nomadic peoples were completely immune, still living, still moving forward. Just then, a flashlight beam flickered in the distance. Jason and Hank froze. In this world, some humans were far scarier than the virus. Luckily, it was just a group of refugees. Hank took the chance to ask for news, and what he heard nearly broke him. The central hospital, where his father was, had burned down. Hank couldn't believe it. He sprinted toward the nearest exit, climbed to the top of a nearby building, and saw thick black smoke rising from the hospital ruins. His hope shattered completely. He smashed a window open and stood before the howling wind, ready to end it all. Jason's heart pounded. He tried to calm him down, inching closer as he spoke nonsense just to keep him distracted. Then, in a sudden move, he grabbed Hank and pulled him back from the edge. He'd saved his life, but not his will to live. After a long silence, Hank handed Jason a small pouch filled with seeds. "These are the seeds of hope," he said. "Keep them safe." With that, Jason continued the journey alone, clutching both the GPS and the seeds. He passed through an underground parking lot and finally reached the mall where his wife worked. But there were only corpses, no sign of life anywhere. He ran to the bookstore his wife and her best friend had opened together. The place was wrecked and a decaying body lay sprawled across the floor. Still, Jason refused to give up. He searched every corner, desperate for a clue, until he spotted a note scrawled on a mirror. It was a message from his wife's friend. "We can't stay here. We're heading to the supermarket." Hope flared in Jason's chest. He rushed to the lower levels of the mall, where the supermarket had been turned into a survivor camp. But the guards there looked at him with suspicion, treating him like an intruder. Jason quickly showed them his wife's photo and pleaded, "Please, I'm looking for her." The leader hesitated, saying he vaguely remembered a pregnant woman passing through. He sent someone to check inside. Jason's face lit up with relief, but then a strange noise came from behind. He turned, flicked his lighter, and froze. A pale, darkened face stared back at him. Before he could react, a mob of feral looters burst from the shadows, weapons in hand, storming the supermarket. A brutal battle erupted. Pure chaos, humans tearing each other apart for scraps. Jason didn't know who to trust. He just slipped through the fighting, shouting his wife's name. Finally, he spotted her best friend. She told him that his wife had gone to the hospital for a pregnancy checkup when the disaster struck. The same hospital not far from the mall. Together, they ran toward the exit. But before they could escape, a burning beam collapsed from above, separating them. The flames grew hotter by the second. Trapped on one side, his wife's friend pushed open a door. Sunlight spilled in. She hesitated. She knew that stepping into the sunlight meant certain death. The virus would kill her instantly. In the end, she couldn't take that final step. Jason, choking back tears, turned and kept running, searching for his wife, but before he could get far, a looter tackled him to the ground. Just when all seemed lost, Hank appeared out of nowhere, saving Jason once again. Jason was overwhelmed with gratitude until he saw the knife wound in Hank's abdomen. Hank managed to knock out his attacker, but stopped short of killing him because it was just a boy. Dropping his weapon, Hank dragged Jason away, and together they made for the women's hospital. But when they arrived, the underground passage was completely blocked. Their only option was to go back to the surface. Jason climbed through a nearby building, just across the street from the hospital. Through a window, he searched every floor, scanning desperately. And then he saw her, his wife. Their eyes met across the distance, and both broke into tears. But joy quickly turned to despair. Between them lay a road, and the sunlight beyond it filled with death. Jason turned to ask Hank what to do, but saw him collapse, pale and trembling from blood loss. With his dying breath, Hank whispered, "Go! Step through that door. There are people waiting for you on the other side. Don't give up. No one knows what the future holds." After saying those final words, Hank closed his eyes. Forever. Jason held back his grief and steadied his breath. Slowly, he walked toward the door. In his hand were the seeds Hank had called the hope of the future. With one deep breath, Jason pulled the door open. The moment he stepped onto the road, an unbearable pressure gripped his chest. The suffocating pain hit instantly. His vision blurred. Every step felt like crossing a mountain range. But he didn't stop. His eyes never left the figure waiting for him ahead. Through the haze, Jason saw his wife's gentle smile. At first, he thought it was just a dying hallucination, until he realized he had truly made it across the street. Jason and his wife finally reunited. Not long after, their child was born, and the seeds Hank left behind had begun to sprout. Then came an even greater miracle. Jason discovered that his newborn child was completely immune to the virus. As time passed, more children were born, each one able to walk freely under the sun. It was as if the earth itself had begun a new cycle of life. Meanwhile, the survivors of the old world, those like Jason, remained trapped within their concrete prisons, forever afraid of the outside world. And maybe, that was the real apocalypse all along. Perhaps this so-called virus wasn't just a disaster, but a punishment, a reckoning for humanity's obsession with technology and isolation. Because when you think about it, when we spend our days glued to screens, scrolling endlessly, building connections only through the internet, when we experience the world solely through the glass of a device, aren't we already living in a cage of our own making? And that's the story of a man who risked everything, not just to survive, but to find love and hope in a dying world. Sometimes the end isn't destruction, it's rebirth. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because somewhere out there, another survivor might need to hear it too.